You guys see the recording button thing?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I want to make sure. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the Fresno State Pre-Vet Club meeting. This is our first one of the semester for spring of 2021. I hope everybody had a good break and relaxed a little bit after the 2020 fall semester. It's a little crazy. All right, so today I'm going to mention a few club things. Xander's going to mention some stuff as well as Shelby, and then we will get to our guest speaker. Okay. So if you guys have seen in the chat, I sent a couple different links in there. I wanted to let you all know that the vet school application for VEMCAST, it has opened up for the 2022 fall time, but it's not due until September of 2021 this year. But I just want to let you guys know it's open. And these links that I've sent, the top one, the Apply to Vet School one, that's a good tool for comparing different vet schools as far as tuition requirements, and it has a bunch of good information in there. And then the second link that I put in the chat is for the AAVMC website, and that has a bunch of information about webinars that they're going to be having and have already had about VEMCAST, vet school. They have like a whole big webinar thing in March where you get to talk to the different schools and stuff, and you have to sign up for that early. So if you scroll all the way down, they will have links posted to webinars that they've already done, and I highly suggest watching them. I've watched a few. They have a lot of good information, especially if you're applying this round or next round. And I will send those again because I don't think people who join after this can see what I already sent, so I'll resend it in the end, okay? I also want to mention for the rest of the semester, we probably won't be doing many events just because we're online again. We do want to try to have a cupcake fundraiser for February, and we will send you guys out a form and information about that more once we get that all together. And we're going to give you guys more time this time. I know there wasn't a lot of time to get all those orders in last time. And we do have some pending dates for meetings, which we'll mention it as the meetings go. And as far as the content you'll be seeing this semester, I've reached out to the vet schools in California, see if we can get a speaker from them, but we'll see. I'll keep you guys updated about webinars, about VEMCAST and everything. Again, the cupcake, and I think that's about it. Sander, did you want to talk about t-shirts?
Yeah, so we've gotten most of the club apparel out now. There are a few people who still need to get a hold of me. So I think the only one in this meeting who still hasn't gotten their stuff is Shelby. I've already talked to her. So for anybody watching this recording, or if anybody asks any of you, they could either reach out to me through my email or the club email, and I'll set up individual appointments to get them their club apparel. Or if shipping is always an option as well for anybody who can't make a pickup appointment. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it about the apparel.
All right, and then Shelby, did you want to mention what you had to talk about?
I mean, I just wanted to quickly say that maybe if you guys didn't read the email, we're not doing Pet of the Month this month just because it was a little last minute that we got the semester started, but we will continue that still this semester, and we will do it next month. So just stay on the lookout for the announcements for that.
All right, so I think that's all the club stuff. Does anybody have questions regarding anything about the club or anything about the rest of the semester, apparel, anything? You can put them in the chat if you want, or you can unmute yourself. Give a few seconds. And we'll get to questions at the end if you just want to put it in the chat, and we'll get to it later. That's fine too. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and let Vince take it away.
Okay, you guys can hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, so let me share my screen with you. Oh, before I do that, just let me introduce myself. My name is Vince Cochin. I tracked you guys down on Instagram, and Caitlin was kind enough to get back to me, even though we sent our email to the wrong email the first time. We sent it just like CSU Pre-Vet. It says CSUF. So that was the That was a point of confusion. But anyway, so the reason I reached out is because I'm a GRE tutor and I have a GRE prep company called Vince Coach and Test Prep. We're based in San Diego, but we work with people all over the place. And I like to talk to like college organizations to try to get you guys good information about how to prepare, even if all you do is prepare by yourself. Obviously, we can help. We're a GRE prep company, but I know that many people, in fact, obviously most people taking the test are not going to pay like thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars to prepare. So I'm going to tell you how to do it by yourself. And that's kind of what I'll cover today. So by the end of this little presentation I have, you're going to learn the three big GRE myths that I think people kind of fall into. They're kind of like things that I get frustrated with that, you know, people tend to kind of do about in terms of GRE prep that I don't think are effective. Then I'm going to just give you my three most basic tips on how to do effective GRE prep so that you can, you know, get that ball rolling. And you guys will be able to use the chat. I think that'll probably be easier than unmuting yourself to just ask questions. So feel free anytime during this presentation, just go ahead and put whatever in the chat. And I'll probably ask you guys questions too and have that in the chat as well, just so I can get a feel for what we're all doing here. So by the way, I really do like pre-vet groups. In fact, I have a pre-vet scholarship that I do every year, which is two $500 awards for people who win the scholarship. And I'll have a link to that in the presentation, which I'll share with you guys later. But I love animals. I don't think in the cards for me to be a vet or, you know, somebody who's intimately involved every day with animals. But I really respect people who, like you guys, are kind of dedicating your lives towards doing that. So always happy to help in any way I can. So and there'll be a little bonus offer I have for you guys too that I'll tell you about at the end. So let me share my screen and see if I can do that. Hold on one second. Share sound. Let's just try this. There it is. I just had to drag the window a little bit, I think. There we go. So right now I'm just like peering. We have a kind of an intricate camera setup here. So can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. So let me present. Okay, so let me move around my little thing here. All right. So we're going to talk about the three GRE prep myths and tips. And just so I can kind of get you guys involved a little bit here, can you all tell me what year you are? Like, just type in your year. Or anybody who's a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or if you prefer first year, second year, third year. And I want to just make sure I can see the chat. Awesome. Senior, junior, fourth year, sophomore, freshman. So kind of most of you are, oh, well, you all responded right away. So for those of you who are freshmen, I'm going to try to mix in a little bit of kind of advice for you just in terms of how to start to think about this stuff, because you don't really have to think about it too hard yet. And those of you who are juniors and seniors, you might actually start to think about like the GRE prep phase of like the GRE soon, just because obviously, you know, you're going to apply to school like in the not too far future. So anyway, just to kind of, you know, for those of you who are sophomores and freshmen, you know, some of this stuff will come in handy and you can reference it later. So anyway, so feel free to chat. If anybody has a question, I'll kind of glance over at the chat and let me just drag it into my field of view so I can actually see it. Yeah, if anybody has a question at any time or a comment, go ahead and chat it to me. Okay, so let's get into the three myths that I kind of talk about for GRE prep. There's a lot of myths, but these are let me click here, the big ones. So the first one that I want to talk about is brand names are good. And I think that this is a myth. Like, let's pretend you guys were taking a road trip and you're really hungry. So you're like looking at this, you know, you pull off into some little town on the side of the highway and you're like, okay, the first thing you see, Taco Bell. Okay, no offense if you like Taco Bell. Maybe you do. I don't know. I haven't eaten Taco Bell in years. I don't even know. But if you're looking for good Mexican food, I think it's objectively true that Taco Bell is not your best option. But it's the most visible option. Do you know what I mean? This is what's called the streetlight effect, if you've ever heard of this. So what I found that most people do for GRE prep is that they go onto Google or they go onto Amazon, of course, right? Like, why wouldn't you? And you search for GRE prep, and the stuff that comes up, you're probably going to get something probably on the first page, if not the second page, right? Because even if you have good intentions about doing some good homework for it, at least if you're like me, like you're going to get fatigued at some point and be like, all right, let me just pick something here because I don't have time to do a ton of research. And this is what the streetlight effect is named for. People tend to look for stuff where it's easiest to look for it. And I think most of us are guilty of this to some degree. So with the companies that you're going to see if you kind of Google GRE prep or go onto Amazon are the biggest companies like Magoosh, Kaplan, the Princeton Review. You guys have probably heard of these companies before. Now, I'm not saying that these companies are just terrible and you should avoid them at all costs, but I'm just going to put it out there that I don't think that they're your best options for GRE prep. And the biggest reason for that is that the material that they use, that they're demonstrating their strategies on, that they're giving you practice questions and tests for, they write those questions, which doesn't sound bad, but the questions that are written by the company that makes the GRE, which is called ETS, are way, way more realistic. And they have nuances to them that the third-party companies like these companies you see here just don't do a very good job of duplicating. So the strategies that these companies teach are not bad, but the way that they teach them on their own practice questions and the practice material that they put out is not a good use of your time, in my opinion. What you do want to use your time on is official ETS material that's written by the company that makes the GRE. And that's what all of my prep kind of revolves around, from my free study plans all the way up to all the, the classes and tutoring we do. We always use official material. The reason that these companies, you might be asking, well, why don't they use official material? It costs, anybody have a guess? Give me a guess. How much do you think it costs to license one GRE question? Go ahead and type your guess in the chat and I'll give a prize. I don't really have a prize. I'm gonna acknowledge the person who gets closest. So if I want to write a GRE book and I want to publish it, but I want to use an official question that the GRE created, how much do I have to pay them to use that question? What's your guess? You probably have some idea from the way I'm setting this up. $50 a question, $80. Try to, go ahead, take a shot. 125. Remember, if you win, I will acknowledge, I don't have a prize for you. I'll acknowledge you. 150. Xander thinks 150. Anybody else have a guess? Anna, come on. $5,000. Is that really? Okay, you're probably just kind of going for it. $200. 75. Well, I don't know who's closest here, but the cost per question is $450 per question. So if you're a GRE prep company, the last thing you're going to do is license questions. You're going to pay somebody to write those questions for you. You're going to pay them, $30 an hour and have them churn out questions. And unfortunately, what this means is that the quality of those questions is not going to duplicate the real GRE, as I like to tell people. Like if you just prepare with third-party stuff, you're going to be in for some surprises when you actually take the test in a bad way. So anyway, this is the myth that I like to kind of put out there. If you find yourself using one of these companies, I don't want you to feel guilty, but I do want you to kind of be aware that there are better alternatives to them. So let me go to my next slide here if I can. The myth number 2 that I want to talk about is that the GRE is like school. So by now you've learned ways to do well in school, I'm assuming. Maybe some of you are still struggling with that, I don't know. But maybe most of you, I think, have kind of learned what you need to do to get a good grade. Some classes are harder than others, obviously, but to get a good grade, you do what the teacher wants, and you do it in the way that the teacher wants, and you study hard and you memorize things and so on and so on. The GRE isn't really like that. And a lot of times if we use the same study habits we used in school to get a good grade or to, understand the material, it's not going to really translate as well to GRE prep. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but I think the main one is the GRE is always going to force you to adapt in different ways. So every different GRE that you can take, all the questions are going to force you to think a little bit. It's not like math homework, where you get an assignment and you do like 20 questions in a row that are the same type of question. And then you take a test or quiz, and they're kind of similar to the homework. The GRE isn't like that, unfortunately. The GRE is going to test things in a lot of different creative ways, so that we really have to get used to, dealing with that and adapting. And the way that we do that is we learn strategies and we practice with official questions. But it's not like school where you can just kind of memorize formulas and do well, or you can just kind of repeat a certain type of question like 20 times in a row and then be good at it. That helps to a degree, but we do have to get a lot of experience with the GRE's questions in addition to learning how to do them. So obviously study habits translate to some degree, but you don't want to just expect it to be like studying for a math test you had in high school or studying for like an English class in college. By the way, just to throw it out there, are you guys worried? Those of you who have checked out the GRE so far, are you more worried about the math or the verbal? You can type it in if anybody has a. By the way, the GRE does have math and verbal on it. Those of you who have not looked at the test, math, verbal, math. We've got a kind of an even split here. Many people fear the math a lot more, and I think it's because you probably haven't done math that much recently compared to like in high school where you had to do math every day. And then of course you're reading every day. So a little more intimidating sometimes for the math. I'll go into like the basic structure of the GRE in a second, but let me get through my myths first. Okay, so let's go to myth number 3. GRE prep is one size fits all. And I like to kind of talk about this because I think in college, if you learn sort of how to do well in a class, if your friend sort of shows you, you can kind of do the same things and you'll probably do well too. But the GRE, people are coming from all different places in terms of their kind of math background, reading ability, vocabulary, and what worked for your friend might actually not work for you very well. And we see this all the time when people like post on places like Reddit. Some people are like, I got a, a perfect score on the GRE is a 340, and people sometimes are like, I got a 330, and here's what I did. I found this, book at the library, and then I did this and I did this. And I read their post and I kind of think to myself, okay, cool. Well, you're coming from a different place probably than maybe the person reading your post. The person reading your post might do those exact same actions, but get like a 290 and feel, like they're frustrated because they followed the directions of the person who did well. So what works for one person might not work for another person. And we kind of have to respect that in terms of GRE prep, that you might have to prepare a little longer than you think, or maybe shorter than you think, potentially, because you're coming from a different place in terms of your reading ability and your math ability than maybe the average person or maybe the person that you're studying with. So just to kind of put it out there, just be open to adjusting your study timeline. It's not always 2 months. It's not always like a certain number of months. Okay, so I want to talk about my tips now. The first tip, try some sample questions in a practice test. So let me just give you a real brief overview of what the GRE is. I don't want to make this too boring and kind of give you every logistical detail of the test, but it's a long test. It's always 2 essays, one of which is like your opinion about something, which is called the issue essay. The next essay is what's called the argument essay, where you kind of have to dissect an argument made by somebody else. And then there's always verbal and math sections. So it usually goes verbal, math, or math, verbal. And when you take the test, you'll actually get a 5th section that's either verbal or math. And one of the sections will have been experimental that you took 3 of. So like if you got 3 verbal sections that day, one of them didn't count. And they're just going to use that data for future questions to kind of determine how hard they are. Just another quick fun fact about the test is that it adapts to you in terms of difficulty. So if you do really, really well on the first verbal section, the next verbal section you get will be a little bit harder now, but that's good. Like you want that to happen because you get a bit of a score bonus. Same thing for math. And if you do really badly on that first verbal section, unfortunately, the next verbal section will be easier, but now you have a score penalty. And if you do average, it just stays the same difficulty. So just, the test does adapt to you by section. So just one of those things. But anyway, so for going back to the tip, how do you get the ball rolling with this stuff? You can go and I have some links on my blog about like how to get started that I'll share with you guys. But if you are really just getting into this, you eventually kind of want to know like, how good am I at the test? Because it's really, it's either motivating that you're close to where you want to be, or it'll scare you and get you moving, hopefully. Well, hopefully it won't discourage you. But we all want to know, we all need to know where we stand if we have a goal. You know, if my goal is to bench press 400 pounds, I need to kind of know what my bench press is now. I can't just go to the gym and start lifting. I mean, at some point, I'm going to figure it out real quick if I'm bench pressing. But if you are studying for the GRE, it's going to kind of inform how hard you have to work and how much time you have to spend if you know where you stand. And the way that we can do this is we can just go onto the ETS website and we can take a practice test or two. No, practice test or two, just one, and it'll give you a score. And that score will be a very realistic score because it's an official test. Okay, now you know where you stand. You can look at the goal score or the scores kind of averages for the programs you're applying to and see where you stand in relation to that. And that'll kind of give you an idea of how long you might need to spend and so on. And on the ETS website, there's sample questions. So before you take a practice test, I would highly recommend that you just kind of get a little used to the format of the questions in the test first, just so you're not totally thrown off. I got to mention a couple other quick tips about that too. On the GRE, you always want to answer every question. There's no penalty for leaving, or there's no penalty for getting something wrong. The only way you can for sure get it wrong is if you leave it blank. So always answer everything. However, you're not going to necessarily pace yourself to finish every question in a section. Give up and guess if you're stuck, you know, just because you don't want to like sink time into the problem. So anyway, this is just a basic thing to get the ball rolling, hopefully to give you a wake-up call if you need it, or to show you where you stand. Tip number 2, use a study plan focused on ETS material. I've talked a little bit about the beginning about how important that is. I have free study plans on my website, 1, 2, 3, and 4 months. And it's really kind of important to get a good study plan going because you need to make your days count, because this is a time-consuming project. It's not something you can do in a couple of weeks before the test. You kind of have to be consistent with it. And I find that the people who are consistent with it over time, surprise, surprise, do the best. So getting a good study plan, making sure your study plan kind of revolves around the official material. And then the third tip, use a journal to track everything. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to improve yourselves in any way. Maybe not, maybe you have. But if you track it, if you track your progress in some kind of journal, you will improve more than if you didn't track it. I think it's just kind of a magical thing. So when you're studying for the GRE, just have a very simple study tracker. I have one in all my study plans where you can kind of log what you do every day, and you can kind of record your practice test scores. You can like have a little mistake journal where you analyze your mistakes. But if you're organized about that, it makes such a big difference than if you just kind of study, you know, whenever you feel like it, and then don't really remember what you did in a given week. So always kind of keep some kind of tracker, even if it's very simple. Even if you don't do anything, don't get mad at yourself in a given day. Just, you know, record that, and then the next day try to do more. So hopefully it doesn't have to take over your life. I don't mean to make it seem like this is going to be this giant endeavor, I hope, but it's something you kind of have to chip away at slowly and steadily, maybe an hour a day for, you know, a few months, give or take, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So most of what I hope to give you guys is really that. Avoid those pitfalls that I talked about, using big brand names, treating the test just like school in terms of how you approach it, and then assuming that what your friend did will work just fine for you, or what you saw online will work just fine for you. And then it's super important to kind of get used to the test, take a practice test, see where you stand, use official material, and then use a journal to kind of track your progress. If you can do all of that, you'll be way ahead of most people. So before I open it up to some questions, I just want to share with you, I have a pre-vet bonus for you. If you buy anything that we do, I'll give you 20% off, and then I offer an additional 10% off if you guys link to me from your website. So no rush to do that, but if you ever do, you'll unlock another 10% off. So quite a bit of a discount off what we normally do. And I'm very happy to speak with any one of you individually if you ever want to just kind of hit me up for like a 15-minute chat. So I'll share my contact info, obviously, with all of you, and I'll share my website with you guys, so you have, you know how to reach me. And then I have a pre-vet scholarship, like I told you. So if you guys are up for applying for that, you can look at the details on my website. The funny thing about my scholarship is that you have to write a poem. to win. I don't know if any of you have heard of my scholarship. Has anybody heard of it before? You might have if you Googled scholarships for vet school. I just came out with it last year, so it's not like famous or anything. But yeah, I enjoy. I was an English major in college, so I like words and poems and stuff. So I figured it would be a nice alternative from like why I want to work with animals essay, which you'll have to probably do like many times and get tired of it. So that's all I got for you. What do you guys think about the GRE? Does anybody? You can either chat it or you can unmute yourself. But can I answer any questions for you about the test, or if anybody's preparing, do you have a specific question you want to ask? I think I see Jessica type in. It's funny, Jessica, it's like extreme finger close up when with the typing.
You
I
know,
like
my camera's located at the bottom of my screen rather than the top, so it looks like this all the time.
it. It's not a bad thing. I'm not making fun of you. It's just like fingers. The scholarship is on my website. Yep, it's right on my blog. If my website is vincecochin.com, and you can find it pretty easily if you just go to my GRE blog, scroll down until you see a picture of a dog. You will have found the scholarship at that point.
I have a question.
Okay, sure. Let me who's that speaking?
Xander.
Hey Xander, what's your question?
So as far as the math section goes, what type of math topics does it cover? I know it probably gets into like trigonometry and algebra, but is there anything you could expand on that?
Yeah, it's kind of like the greatest hits of math. It's not the deep cuts. It's it's basically just arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and then what they call data analysis, which is kind of like statistics. So it's basically like pretty basic level math. I have another thing on my website which you guys might find. It's called my like complete math concept guide, and it shows you all the different concepts they're going to test, and it has links to Khan Academy so that you can kind of learn how to do them for free, as to build a good foundation for them if you forgot them. So it's going to be things like, fractions, equations, triangles, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anna says, how would you compare it to the SAT? Actually, it's pretty similar. It's back in, I don't know what year you took the SAT, but the GRE used to be written by the same company as the SAT, so they're very similar. You have to do reading comprehension. You have to know vocab. There's like fill in the blank vocab. There's no grammar. If you took the SAT when it had grammar on it, there's no grammar. So it's just basically for the verbal part of the test, like vocab, fill in the blank vocab, where you have like some context over the vocab word, like it's a sentence and you have to kind of plug in the right word to fill in the blank or blanks. And then reading comprehension. There's a few different styles of reading comprehension, and it's a little more like the SAT was like kind of passages written for the layman. The GRE is written more at an academic level. So the reading comprehension passages are harder to read than the SAT, but if you're used to academic writing, they might not be so bad for you. And then the math is very, very similar to the SAT as well. There's a certain kind of question for the math, which you'll get used to, called quantitative comparison, where it's like quantity A is this and quantity B is this, and you have to say which quantity is bigger, or if they're equal, or if you can't tell. And that's a bit different than the SAT for sure, but it's at the same time, it's not super hard to get used to. Jessica, how far in advance would you recommend people start studying? I know everyone is different, but generally, it's like, come on, Vince, just tell me when to start. I know what you mean. The general guideline I would say for the average person is probably, I'm just gonna say like 3 to 4 months. And that's assuming that you can study for probably on average, maybe like 1 to 2 hours a day. So it depends on how serious you are, where you're starting, where you want to end up, blah, blah, blah. But I find that that's going to really give you the potential to improve as much as you possibly can. Now, if you're not that person who's like, hey, I'm not going to really spend 3 months doing this, there's plenty of people who do quite well studying for 2 months. But let's err on the side of caution if you're new to this, and you can always take the test sooner than you planned if you feel like you're ready sooner. You can take the test like literally whenever, whether it's in person or you can take it at home now. So you can schedule a test date like whenever you're ready. You want to do it a little bit in advance, but like let's say you only needed 2 months to hit your goal score on a practice test. Cool, take the test in 2 months. But I would budget the 3 to 4. Oh, sorry, Regan, the word verbal is throwing me off. Is it verbal portion like oral presentation? No, I didn't do it. That's my fault, Regan. I didn't do a very good job of explaining that. Verbal just means the part of the test where you have to answer questions based on like reading passages, and you have to answer questions that are like fill in the blank vocabulary. So when I say like a verbal section, it's all on the computer. It's either going to be a reading comprehension question where you have to answer a question about the passage, or a vocab question where you have to fill in the blank with the right vocab word.
I have a
No,
question. Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Do you think or have you noticed a higher success rate in students who do use your program compared to others?
Well, yeah. The short answer is yes. I mean, I don't introduce myself very well. I've been doing this for 12 years full time. So I've been around the block a little bit. And basically, um, it's funny. I was actually talking to my wife about this last night, and because she's starting a business and she sometimes doubts herself and doesn't really think she's that good at what she's doing. And I'm like, yeah, like if I look back at myself now, like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I'm like, back then I thought I was okay. I thought I was pretty good at what I did. But looking back, I'm like, I didn't know what I was doing. Because with what I know now, so I look back at the 10 years ago me, I'm like, oh man, like you weren't doing a good job, buddy, not compared to now. So experience, I mentioned all this because experience really matters in terms of the nuances of how to teach different people and how to teach the strategies in ways that people can kind of duplicate. And but that's where I'm coming from in terms of success. um I think the honest answer is there's always a range. Some people improve just a little bit. It's possibly once in a while people don't improve at all, and some people improve a tremendous amount, and a lot of people are somewhere in between. The people who improve the most, just to kind of give you a typical story of somebody who improves a lot, somebody who probably budgeted 3 to 4 months and was just hardcore about achieving a really high score, was very motivated, bugged me all the time to like get extra things to do. And you can kind of imagine what's going to happen with this kind of person. I mean, they're going to do well because of those things. They brought, of course, some inherent intelligence to the table, but the work ethic was a huge factor. And so I find that the two factors, you can't do too much about where you're coming from, and because you can't change your past. However, you have a choice how hard to work, and you do have a choice about what materials to use. And I find if people work super hard on ETS material, they're going to improve a lot, whether they work with me or not. Just to throw it out there too, there's plenty of really good strategy videos from tutors like me and from me personally on YouTube. So if you were like, hey, I want to learn how to take the test, but I don't think I'm going to really realistically like pay for a course, you could totally just go on YouTube. There's so many good strategy videos. I have tons of them on my YouTube that you could check out. But yeah, like I think the kinds of people, there's the pitfalls that I mentioned with the myths are kind of like warnings. Like you can work really hard on the wrong material and not improve that much. Or you can obviously, if you were taking, I tend to talk people out of taking classes with like the big companies, and like if your school offers a class, because a lot of times the big companies tutors are not like in it for the long haul. They tutor isn't like a career for most people. You know what I mean? So like a lot of times if you go to a big company and you take a class, the person teaching that class might be very new. And maybe they're not, but a lot of times they are, because the big companies don't pay very well. So why would people stick around? They're either going to move on to a different career, or they're going to maybe go work for themselves like I did 12 years ago. So the short answer, yes, I like, we do make a difference. But then again, any company operating like we do, I think it's fair to say would. Okay, long-winded answer to the question. How long is the test? Jessica says, in terms of hours, it's 4 hours long by the time you're done. The essays are each a half an hour. Each verbal section is a half an hour. Each math section is 35 minutes. Like I said, there's 5 of those. So by the time you sit down, from the time you get up again, it's 4 hours. There, you do get a 10-minute break after the 3rd section. So anyway, it's a long test. So part of the battle is like taking practice tests under realistic conditions. So if you're going to fire up a practice test, especially once you've been at this for a while, like make it real. Don't get interrupted halfway. Take it somewhere where you can't get interrupted. Like take the whole thing at once. Do the essays, which a lot of people like to skip, and that way you're preparing your brain for like the real thing. You know, if you think about it. So anyway, who else has a question? Usually I get a lot of questions about like details about the test, like how many questions there are and how it's scored. The score is like 130 to 170 in each for verbal and for math. So you get a combined score for verbal and for math of like up to 340. And then an average score is like about a 152, 153 for each section. So it's like 50th percentile, give or take. I don't even really know like what vet schools that are good consider to be a good score, but I'm sure you guys can find that out if you don't already know. Let's see, what else can I can talk all day about this stuff, but I won't. I'll let you guys go. But does anybody else have a question before I go?
Yeah, I have a question. So, I haven't looked at your material or anything like that yet, but as far as the material, so it sounds to me like if we were to like purchase a course through your website, we would just have like access to you like tutoring, to ask questions type of thing. How is it that you go, just a little general about how the courses work?
Oh yeah, like if you did want to take, I mean, we have a few options, but one of them is like a classic like class where it's up to 12 people. It's via Zoom and we meet every week and we go over every part of the test. But what I found is pretty important to have outside of class is office hours. So we have office hours that you can come to, and they tend to be just like any class. Like how many people show up at office hours? Like 10% maybe. So there tends to only be like 2 or 3 hardcore people who will show up to the office hours, but you can treat that like a private tutoring session, and go over anything you want with me. So there's a bit of an advantage to taking a live class as opposed to just like a video class. And I do that a couple of times a week just so people have some options for office hours. But yeah, and then, other than that, it's just kind of a typical class where we talk about stuff, and I try to keep it as interactive as I can. It's not like a lecture because you do have to kind of participate and like try to articulate what you're thinking for certain problems to really get the benefit of me helping you. So I find that if, the small class size kind of helps people, get that out of it as well. But yeah, I always tell people like, look, you don't have to pay anything to do successful GRE prep if you don't want to. If you can just self-study and make yourself motivated to do that, you can just follow a study plan and be successful. And then if you do want more help, obviously, companies like us can help. But just to put it out there that that's not, not your only option to prepare well. Anybody else out there who has a question? Well, thank you for being pre-vets. I really respect what you guys are doing with your lives, and I'm happy to help you. If any of you want a little more personal direction, if you didn't feel like speaking up today, if you want to just email me and say, hey, I was in the Fresno State thing and I have this question, I'm happy to answer it. And I also have like live office hours that you can come to for free on Thursdays. That's linked to on my website as well. So I'll send an email to you guys. I think I have your email correct now. And I'll just kind of put like, oh yeah, here are all the resources I mentioned in the call, just in case you want to find them and not just randomly search on my website. All right. Well, thank you for having me.
All right. We appreciate you coming and talking to everybody about your GRE prep. I know it was helpful for me. I have to take the GRE in June. So
Time to get started pretty much. Yeah.
I need to start. Yeah. Yeah, I've been looking at all those major ones that you mentioned. I was like, "Oh, maybe I should look elsewhere." But yeah, I'll definitely check
Well,
it out.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's really
not,
helpful.
and it's super common. Yeah, I don't feel bad about that. I mean, almost everybody starts there, and except if you're on Reddit. If you guys, I don't know if you guys like Reddit, but the people who go on Reddit, I'm on there all the time. The GRE Reddit, just our GRE. That's a good place to ask questions too, and that you can get good information there as opposed